everybody. This is our first Aging in Society seminar series for 2023. So I just want to introduce myself in case some of you don't know who I am. My name is Elizabeth Russell. I'm the director of the Trent Centre for Aging and Society, and I'm also a faculty member in psychology here at Trent. And I'm really happy to see so many people from our Trent community, but also so many people from outside of Trent here to listen to Bharati's talk. So yeah, it's just really exciting to do these things in person after so long of Zooming. I'm actually happy to say this is not our first in-person event after so long, but yeah, just really happy to see you here and learn about an important new area that TCAS is focusing on. And all of this ties into, I just want to give a little promo. We've got Adabeo. Do you love it? Yeah, there's Adabeo right here. So we have a brand new, you might have seen on our Trent social media channels or the Trent news story, we have a brand new Master's in Interdisciplinary Aging Studies that just launched this week here at Trent University that is facilitated through TCAS. So I just wanted to make you aware of this if you didn't happen to see this already. So it's a research-based master's program that also has, hi Steve, thank you for coming, nice to see you. It's a research-based program that also has a placement. So it's really integrating experiential learning as well as research. And it's, as many things that we do here at TCAS, it's a true interdisciplinary program. So students can come with a background in like psychology or sociology or like biology or anything at all to study aging from various perspectives. So if you know of anybody that might be interested in this program as a student or could share this, please share. We have this material through TCAS available, and we're starting in September of 2023. So TCAS has been around for 12 years, but this is our first real foray into teaching. We have a specialization in aging studies already, but to really have an academic program, this is extremely big and exciting for us. And it just really leads into that sort of experiential learning, that intergenerational learning that we're valuing more than ever here than before at TCAS, that will lead nicely into the long-term care and seniors village project that's to come. So we're going to see students and older people connected in so many different ways. And this master's program is just one of those ways that can facilitate that connection. So I just wanted to make you aware of that. But the other point of today is to introduce Dr. Bharati Sethi. Dr. Sethi came to us in, what year did you come here? Was it last year?
Yeah, this fall.
Yeah, July. Dr. Sethi is a Tier 2 Canada Research Chair in Work, Ethnicity, Race, and Aging, and your home is in the Political Studies Department here at Trent. And she has been funded in many different projects, and you've worked with so many different people. Everyone we hear from knows you in one way or another. She's got amazing research, solid academic research foundations out there, but also really inspiring community-based work as well. Has contributed to so much research, peer-reviewed research, an edited book, and many public presentations in recent years. And you've been awarded, you didn't even list your awards, so I'm going to say a lot of good things, and it's been featured by many different news media. So we're just really happy to have you here at Trent as our new CRC and to really bring the lens of focus of TCAS on this particular topic that we're going to hear about from you today. So before we begin with Bharati's talk, I just want to mention two things. I want to invite you to get up throughout the talk. We've got some snacks at the back, so please feel free and comfortable to just get up. It's no big deal. And I also want to say this is a series of talks that we're doing, so our next event is on March 22nd. We're launching a new book co-edited by 3 TCAS members, Dr. Mark Skinner, Dr. Rachel Herron, and Dr. Rachel Barr, and that is on Zoom. And their book is on, it's the Sharing Dance book, if some of you have heard about that project. And it's sort of research that was conducted through their research program in conjunction with the National Ballet School, bringing dance to older people in rural communities. So that's our next event, which is on March 22nd. So mark your calendars if you're interested in that. We haven't done a lot of promotion because we wanted to focus on the talk today, but just a heads up. So yeah, we're just so happy to have you here. Did I forget anything, Amber? Okay, I always forget.
There are 2 seats here if you guys want to come here.
That's okay.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Happy Valentine's Day. And happy Galentine's Day to women friends. I sent it to my friend. She goes, you misspelled it. I said Gallon. Anyone know Galentine's Day, what it is? It's like Valentine's, but you send it to your female friends. So thank you for coming. So the goal of this presentation really is to provide you with an overview of the research program, tell you a little bit about my CRC, and then I'm going to end with just the highlights of a study that we've completed. So before I do that, there are some statistics that I want to highlight. As of 2021, 22% of our Canadian population are immigrants, of which over half are female. If you look at the racialized minorities, 26.53%. And older adults identified 65 and older is 18% of our immigrant population. In Peterborough has one of the highest rates of older adults compared to the province, 22.3%, compared to Ontario, which is 16.4%, and Canada, 17.5%. The Indigenous population is relatively younger, but as you see, from 2006 to 2016, it's growing, 7.3%. Now, one of the things you may or may not know is that in 2021, 3 million person support workers provided care to older adults. 2023, it will be more, 3 million. And I'll talk more about person support workers. So my journey, I'm an immigrant from India. Over 2 decades, I came really young. I actually came in hospitality management. I wanted to be a chef, but universe had a different plan for me. My research journey I make really good martinis if anybody wants to come and see. My research journey started in my BA in community psychology, where I looked at, along with employment agency called Training Vision, that was funded at that time by what was called Human Resource Development Canada, looking at employment agency program for highly skilled immigrants. So we developed a 6-week program that was funded by HRDC for 3 years. I was at that time in Brantford, and my research really was focused in Grand Erie, which is the city of Brantford and Brant, Haldimand, Norfolk County. You guys can come in the front. There are two seats here. Nobody wants to be near me. Grand, Haldimand, and Norfolk counties. That's where I did a lot of my work. So what was happening was the geographical dispersion policies were designed to push immigrants from what we call MTV, or Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver, to rural regions. However, what we found was that a number of the service providers, so it was secondary migration. Immigrants would first come to MTV, and then they would basically move to smaller regions, and the service providers had no resources to resettle them. So I was one of the 3 people who started what was called ISTEP, Immigrant Settlement. It was like a task force for resettlement. And through Workforce Planning Board of Grand Erie, if you see the green one over there, GTAB, it's now called Workforce Planning Board of Grand Erie, they said, well, we are not getting any funds because, as you know, the government wants evidence. Even though they're pushing immigrants there, and we know there's a lot of immigrants. So I did my MSW thesis in collaboration with the Workforce Planning Board of Grand Erie. It was a large quantitative study looking at 213 newcomers and 203 service providers. And what I did was a gap analysis. I looked at the gap analysis in education, training, employment, and what their work experience was. I'm very much interested in knowledge mobilization. All of these things that you see on the board are actually knowledge mobilization. I publish academic papers, but I really think that academics have to get off their ivory tower and translate evidence into language that service providers can not only understand, but they can use. So once the study was done, I did a community report for the Workforce Planning Board of Grand Erie and went with them to the funders. And as a result of the study, we got $1 million to establish the first local immigrant partnership in Brantford. When I finished my MSW, I had a Vanier Canada. I could have done my PhD. It was a $150,000 scholarship. But the community came back to me and said, OK, we built this momentum. We are getting more and more women, racialized women coming here. We will help you. Let's do a study for the work experiences of racialized women. That led into what you see, do you see what I see? So I did Photo Voice. That was my first arts-based project. I gave women cameras, and they were really expensive digital cameras, and I asked them to take photographs of their work and health experience. To my knowledge, it was the first photo voice study that looked at the relationship between two variables. Most photo voice studies are really look at gap analysis or community development. So I converted their photographs into 21 art pieces, and I've done over 40 exhibits across Canada. I hope I will do one exhibit here. And what you see in tapping into global talent, I also believe that knowledge mobilization has to be targeted to particular service providers or employers or particular groups. So during the course of my MSW, I found that employers were really not aware that we had highly skilled immigrants in Grand Erie. So I supervised 2 undergrad students, one from media studies and one from journalism, and we profiled 10 immigrants into what is called an employer resource of tapping into global talent that we distributed to all the employers. My whole research is fueled by my own experiences. I'm very much interested in policy because I know intimately how immigration policy works. I was a non-status for 4 months every year for 7 years when I was working as a waitress. So much of that is from social justice perspective. Before I came here, I was at Western University King's College of Social Work. There I was there for 5 years, and I started what was called the Trent Centre for Creativity. That was to get service providers as well as students come together and design research projects in a manner that the service providers could actually use, and it was done from a social justice perspective, and it was innovative research project, dance, music, whatever it may be. At the end of every research, I have a research launch that I invite because I'm interested in policymaking. Nobody wants to read my 330-page thesis. So I invite the mayor, MP, MPP, and it's always been well attended. And as a result, as you see that from the MPP, Dave Lebach. So moving forward, 2015 was my first academic job at King's College. In 2016, I was a co-investigator in 3 grants. One was Emerging Voices, SHRC funded. And what Emerging Voices looked at was Syrian refugees. So the evaluation of 3 programs. One, the privately sponsored refugees, government-assisted refugees, or blended visa officer referral. So for those who don't know, have a much background in immigration, immigrants today can come into Canada through 3 major categories. One is the economic category, which I call the merit-based. Basically, you get points for education, employment, your work experience, how old you are. If you're less than 40, you get higher points, and you have a work experience and adaptability. I've never understood what adaptability means. And then is the humanitarian program, which we get the refugees to come in from, and we have the family class sponsorship policy. Family class sponsorship policy is if you're living in Canada, you can sponsor someone from outside Canada, but you are basically responsible for that person for a period of time, maybe 5 years, 10 years. So the second project was the Achieving a Caregiver-Friendly Workplace Standard, was a SHRC and CIHR collaboration, and it was a pilot study to develop a standard so to help employers design policies that would help caregivers balance their work and life. So they're basically unpaid caregiving and their paid work. The Aging Well that I'll speak about a little bit today was a pilot program that led into ICOI project, Inclusive Community for Older Adults. Basically was really, we looked at the social support, and I'll present some of the findings of the Aging Well later. The ICOI project is across 10 cities, 4 provinces. It's a $2.5 million project, and I'm the lead for London, Ontario. The transnational caregiving, 2018 to 2023, we are towards the end of it. To my knowledge, it's a first study in North America and Australia. Actually, I don't know of any study or paper that's been published that focuses on transnational carer employees. And what that means is we have studies emerging on transnational caregiving. So transnationalism really means that immigrants are occupying 2 social spaces. They're living in Canada, and they are providing caregiving to people in their country. Caregiving may be in the form of sending money home. A large part is sending money home. It may be that you're talking on the phone for social support. You're praying with your family. It may be that you're arranging funeral rites. So this transnational caregiving project involved 3 populations. One was European immigrants, racialized immigrants, and indigenous populations. And I used multimodal ethnography, in which I asked the participants to give me one item that represented their caregiving experiences. So next that you see is CRC. I highlighted 1, 2, and 3. Those are the projects I haven't started. So while this Canada Research Chair program, which is on person support workers, was going on, I applied for an Inside Development grant that I got about $72,000 to look at the lived experience of person support workers. The other project is a CIHR looking at, it's with Muslim Resource Centre for Social Support and Integration in London, Ontario, developing an intervention program for siblings of Muslim children with disabilities. And we just got a third SHIRK IDG with Dr. Karun Karki from British Columbia, looking at de-skilling of internationally trained professionals. So what is my Canada Research Chair in? Believe it or not, I can actually say it without looking at it. When people ask me what was your CRC, I had to look at my hand because I would write it down and say, I don't know what my CRC is. And care work, ethnicity, race, and aging. It's a big, long statement. But I believe that the program that I have shown you and the overview of all of the projects that I have, I'm really looking at populations that are foremost in contemporary Canadian consciousness. They are the racialized populations, newcomers, and older adults. So my CRC aligns very well with Trent's University strategic plan, specifically with Healthy and Sustainable Communities Research Cluster. But I think more important is that it aligns with the culture of Trent for co-creation of knowledge with the participants. It also aligns well with developing our capacity for interdisciplinary research in social determinants of health. And third, developing strategic partnerships. It also aligns with TCAS's direct fit with the objectives of Trent Centre for Aging Society that has sponsored this today, University Integrated Seniors Village Campus of Care and Development. So who are person support workers? You must have heard a lot about during COVID. Person support workers emerged as COVID-19 heroes. But the pandemic also highlighted their vulnerability in the federal public policy domain. It also highlighted their subordinate position in the neoliberal healthcare sector. Person support workers work in a community setting. They can work in long-term care. They can work privately in the house, or they can basically in any of the hospitals or retirement homes. So there are a number of different sites, healthcare sites, that person support workers work. I worked as a person support worker for 2 years for Red Cross, and I know very intimately how physically and emotionally demanding that job is, how underpaid it is, how undervalued it is. So I'm hoping, so this person support workers is actually my CRC as well as a SHIRK. I'm going to use photo voice to look at the lived experiences of racialized PSWs in Peterborough, hopefully expand to Oshawa and Brantford. And at the end, I hope that I will use the TCAS's knowledge mobilization hub services and share their photographs or art exhibit to local, national, and international audiences. So why should we care? What's the big deal about person support workers? How is it related to care, ethnicity, and aging? So as I mentioned to you, that immigrants come in 3 different classes. So Canada actually had a race-based policy until 1967. We actually did not admit people who were based on coming from India, China, and other countries. We wanted only white population to come here. In 1967, with the shortage of global, skill shortage, free trade, Canada decided, we need to compete for global skill shortage. So they changed it to points-based system. So currently, most economic immigrants come through the points-based system. Despite the increase in racialized populations and the reduction of European populations, it wasn't until 2010, think about 1967 and 2010, that Canadian researchers actually looked into the occupational health disparities based on ethnicity and immigration status. And why is that important? So my study on PSW, I want to look at racialization along their different intersecting identities. How does their ethnicity, how does their race, how does the geography where the person lives or works as a social determinant of health, and how does their immigration status in long-term or home care, community care, what is their lived experience? The third thing I found when I applied for this study was that researchers have never, like there are a lot of study on racism, but healthcare setting has not been taken as a site or rarely taken as a site of racism and discrimination. And the 3 PSWs who were in my photo voice study, my PhD study, I know from evidence they experience racism, discrimination, aggression, microaggression, and violence at work. So if we connect the aging and care work, most of the studies are done in Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. Even though we have geographical dispersion policies, even though immigrants are moving to smaller cities, much of the research is done there. So I'm hoping that my CRC in PSW will look at their lived experience along the urban-rural continuum. Because if any of you have lived in rural regions, you know that there are a number of different issues. The culture is different. The resources are different. And we need to find out in Peterborough, which has the highest, one of the highest older adults population, what are the things, what are these services available or unavailable, or what is it they need in these cities outside MTV. And I think that many times the studies on older adults ignore PSWs, and studies on PSW ignore older adults. And I'm hoping that through this study, I can understand what is the meaning of concept of care for PSWs. I know from the systematic reviews or past research that even if we have the Charter of Human Rights, and even if we have workplace policies that the PSWs that I talked about can complain, they're afraid. So I have one participant who was in her 50s, and the only job she could get, and she was an executive assistant in Nigeria, was catching chickens. And then she gets a PSW job, and she says, well, I don't want to leave this. It's better than catching chicken. So many of them keep quiet. Others in the culture, like my culture, you don't talk back to older adults. And I'm really interested in knowing that even when they're experiencing, or whatever they're experiencing, are they standing up? So PSWs are really pivotal to the care of older population, to the quality of their care. If they are unhappy, if they are being abused, then the quality of care to the older adults will suffer. So I'll end this section with racialized care workers' invisibility is deeply tied to larger structural forces that shape the very meaning of who counts in calculations of risk and whose labor is essential for the system. But it is so unseen as not even to be factored into these calculations. So I'll end with the lived experience of one of the PSWs in my PhD study. Most of the residents in long-term care, retirement homes in Brantford are white. Most of the staff are white. So she was the only black PSW in one of the retirement home, and her manager asked her to go and clean a resident. So when she went there, the client opened the door, and she said, I don't want to be touched by a black woman. And she said, ma'am, I'm wearing white gloves. The way manager responded was to send someone else. So if we keep silent about the racialization of PSWs and do nothing, we are basically saying everything's okay and nothing needs to be done. So just take a breath, and I'll give you the brief this. So just think about that quote, and just think for a second about that experience. So the Aging Wealth study was really done to look at social connectedness or social network of older adults. We wanted to see what were the factors, what were the services available, and what they needed for social support, and how these shape the older adults' ability, autonomy, and resiliency. So it was a pilot study, as I mentioned earlier. that led into the ICOI project. Multidisciplinary, so there were 4 sites, Toronto, London, Ottawa, and Waterloo. I was the lead for London. It was a community-based methodology, which means that the variables that were selected right from the beginning of the research to knowledge mobilization was done with a research advisory group that consisted of older adults, that consisted of immigrants, that consisted of key stakeholders and community leaders. In London, we did focus groups with older immigrants. Older adults were defined as those 60 years and older, and we developed key themes. I like to use this framework, it's my background in social work, because I think that it really provides a holistic picture of the migrant journey. The ecosystem, the micro factors that look at the personal factors impacting older adults' life. Meso looks at the community factors, and macro looks at the larger bodies of knowledge or policies. So together, it helps you understand the interrelated factors that shape older adults' life. I often use that with intersectionality theory. So in London, we tried to for gender-based analysis, and I know that male and female binaries are problematic, but here there were people who identified as male and female, Spanish and Arabic speaking, 60 years and older. So for gender-based analysis, we did pretty good in recruiting similar male and female numbers, 54 older adults, 14 family members, and 12 community leaders. So these themes that I'm going to briefly present are based on the findings with older adults. Social isolation is a public health risk of our time. The secret to living longer may be your social life. I think as academics, we need to get more of a social life. So 3 themes emerged: meaning of aging, social inclusion, ethnicity, and social support. It was very interesting, and I would like you to pay attention to the brackets, whose quote it is, Spanish male or female, Arabic male or female. So one attitude was, well, you can't help it. My childhood is gone, my youth is gone, adulthood, now I'm old, I need help. The other attitude was, I don't even understand why you're asking me this question. It's normal, everybody grows old. But the third one was, this is a new phase in my life. Children are gone, grandchildren come, those who are grandparents, they don't stay, they go away, which is really good, and it's a great time for me to enjoy life. But every single participant yearned for home. Our lives have turned upside down. It's a new country, different language, and our kids live in different places, life circumstances, problems with our race and culture. So think about migrating at 60 years and older, completely to a new country. There are moments we miss our country, we miss our customs, our food, our friends. When we think of intervention, we are thinking of big, lofty things. But look at the last quote. The quality of life for a person of the golden years is very different. We in Colombia go out and find a bakery, yes? With all that we like here, we cannot do that, we are afraid. Imagine you cannot even go to the bakery. And they come in here, but there are no jobs, steady jobs in London. So kids are living in Toronto. This is a collectivist culture where parents live with their children. They come here thinking they're going to live with their children, but they're living in London, and the others are living in Toronto. So we asked them, so you're living alone, why don't you go to a retirement home? And they say, oh no, we would like to go, but it'll be a shame for our children. Everybody in the church, everybody in the mosque is going to say that you're not taking care of our parents. The other one surprising finding for both Spanish male and female was that there was a stigma. So you ask them, why aren't you going out to the community center? And they'll say, I have a cane. Or I have a wheelchair, I'm not going to go out. What will people think? Health and aging. So on one hand, it was a positive stuff. Oh, if I go to the Shoppers Drug, did you know that 65 and older can get a discount? They can send your medicines home. But one, it was surprising, and it wasn't surprising. I mean, we knew that they have lost their social connections, but there was an overwhelming theme of depression. And here is a lack of advice. Older adults should be taught about the emotional aspect of aging, because many here look for this advice, then they go to the church and listen to the sermon of the church. But it does not teach you how to face that negative aspect of your life. Many, many of them spoke about that. Gender, every single person identified as female said, oh, I can actually have a life in Canada. Look at the Canadian ladies. They go play bingo. Look, they're going out alone. And if you see you may think the English is, but we verbatim transferred that just to maintain the nuances of their experiences. The Canadian ladies and the Latin ladies who are still in the world of usefulness, in the world of the contribution, in the world of studying, laughing, being mothers, which help us to be better, I admire them and I learn a lot from them. So what does this all mean in terms of policy agenda? Those who are in aging studies talk a lot about aging out of place, but think about the physiological and psychological realities of aging in another country. I would say that I would definitely enjoy aging when I was in my own country, sharing the daily life of my country with the people I grew up with, parents with the peers. Most focus on older adults in immigrants is on economic spaces. We connect their lack of social capital, depression, wanting emotional support. How do we help them develop that social capital, develop friendships, develop intimate relationships? But we can't do that until we shift this dialogue of ageism, especially in immigration policy. Today, it's very difficult to sponsor your parents or grandparents. Yes, you can bring them in a grandparent visa, but you better show a lot of financial capital. And Canadian government does not want older adults to come with the assumption that they're drained to the healthcare system. So what were the recommendation of service providers and adults? What can service providers do? What can researchers do is access to non-economic spaces, recreation, physical fitness, cultural community centers. Then they asked, why are all the pamphlets in English when we have a highly Arabic-speaking, high percentage of Arabic-speaking and Spanish-speaking population coming to London? Again and again, this theme of teach us how to manage our emotions, teach us how to look at that psychological support. Greater and faster access to healthcare. We know healthcare is in a crisis. I don't have a family doctor. I'm probably never going to have one. But we also have to focus on gender, really focus on gender. If they come through family class sponsorship policy, they are dependent upon their partner, their husband, their kids for everything. What happens? Or they come in grandparent visa. What happens if there's domestic abuse? How did they get out? Feminization of poverty. We know that older women are more likely to be poor. Men are also providing caregiving, but mostly women are caregivers. And most of the women that were there, basically they didn't have any money of their own. Simple things like using the social media. How do I use the social media? How do I use WhatsApp? How do I research services? And one of the recommendation was from most of the adults was, everybody who's telling us about services is young. They don't understand what it is aging. Why can't we have older adults come and help us as volunteers to help us so they understand, they empathize with us? And someday, I wish I can advocate for older adults. So to end, I really believe that what I'm really hoping for and aiming for is moving towards equity through all my research program. To foster inclusive community for older adults through community-engaged research and advocacy that challenges ageist practices, whether that stigmatizes a new immigrant, refugee, indigenous person, or settler. So the ICOI project is going to be, it's a 6-year project. It's a mixed method study. We just finished the quantitative data analysis. We have applied for research ethics for qualitative phase. It's looking at 3 streams: social inclusion and placemaking, political inclusion and citizenship, and economic inclusion. But it's looking at the 3 streams in relation to social connectedness. How do all of these 3 streams factor into the lack of social capital, lack of social connectedness for older adults? As I said, it's around 10 cities and 4 provinces. And we are also going to look specifically at gender. I was using the clicker well till now. So to end with, I showed you that contacts with micro, macro, meso. Much of the research looks at post-migration. And we forget about the pre-migration experiences. Older adults can't go to the bakery. Transportation is a huge issue. they don't even know how to take a bus. Refugees, we look at post-migration barriers. We may look at pre-migration, but we don't look at the transit journey. Some of them are there 2 years in refugee camps. So I think that unless we don't fragment the journey, and I understand as researchers we can't do everything, but at least putting in context the whole immigrant person rather than fragmenting them into different these experiences, our interventions are really not going to be holistic. This may sound a little cheesy, but whose responsibility? That photograph that you see by Krishna is from a photo voice study. So when I was teaching in social work, my students would come in and say, Dr. Sethi, but there's so many problems in the world. And we think that unless we do big lofty things, we are not going to make a change in the world. And I should say to them, I should give them one assignment. I said, how many know your neighbors? 9 out of 10 didn't. How many know if an older adult or a newcomer is staying there? I don't know. What do you do if you see a newcomer who can't speak English in a grocery store? So we think of these lofty things, but we don't think of the ripple effect of the very small things that we can help newcomers. Your colleagues, academia is largely white. If there's a newcomer, do we even take the time to ask them? So basically, I think that it's everybody's responsibility, the resettlement of newcomers. We blame the government a lot. Yes, government can do more, the federal, provincial, but it's everyone's responsibility, the employers, the service providers, the government, and ours. Thank you. Dhanyavad means thank you in English.